Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for small business owners and entrepreneurs, where we show you how to build a successful business and to have a life too. We're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time and to get off the treadmill so we can experience a life of significance. And now, your host and the author of the #1 best-selling business book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, Chuck Blakeman.
Hi, and welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. I'm Chuck Blakeman, and today we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about giving people their time back. I wrote a book called Rehumanizing the Workplace by Giving Everybody Their Brain Back. We're going to talk about a piece of this, how stakeholder autonomy drives profits, productivity, and satisfaction. Let's jump in. A friend of mine and I were talking this week about how well companies performed during the pandemic with nobody in the office, and how in the face of all the research that shows that productivity not only didn't increase, but in many cases went up, that the majority of companies have gone back to dragging people back into what I call the corporate daycare centers and micromanaging them again like children. It's a form of cognitive dissonance that shows corporations don't actually run on data very often. But a lot of times they run on emotion and a need to control things that don't need to be controlled. It's not a new thing. Companies have felt the need to manage people and treat them like children since they herded them into factories in the 1800s. But the reality is that the data has always shown that when we give people their brains back and allow them to be adults who are able to manage their own time and their own work, that the company always benefits with higher profits, higher productivity, higher stakeholder satisfaction, and exponentially lower resignations than in companies that still manage their people. You heard the word stakeholder, by the way. That's how I define employees, because I wrote a book called Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. The word employee is unrecoverable. It is so tied to so many bad things. We use the word stakeholder, which is very different. Employees are people who behave and manage like children at work, and stakeholders are people who are adults at work and have their own motivation to keep going. Let's look at a few examples of companies that have actually done this right for decades. This is not a new idea of giving people their time back. In 1959, Bill and Vivian Gore created a company in their basement you might recognize as Gore Incorporated, but more familiar with the idea of Gore-Tex. They manufacture Gore-Tex, the magic cloth that keeps wind and water out while it still breathes. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when they started, because from the start they decided there would be no managers in their company. People would instead be in work groups that manage themselves. It's now a multi-billion-dollar company, and as of a few years ago, they still had no managers, even though there was a desire by some to give up and go back to the industrial age model of heavy supervision. Hundreds of large companies and a lot of small ones have adopted this managerless core operating system, and all of them exist at the top of their industries year after year. Today, we won't try to cover the whole managerless operating system. We'll just talk about two aspects of it: flexible hours and flexible location, when I work and where I work. In 2014, Richard Branson's daughter pointed out a policy Netflix had put in place about 10 years earlier. It's a policy that most of the world had overlooked, a policy that allowed employees to take unlimited vacation. Netflix had pioneered this in around 2004, yet almost no one outside of Silicon Valley knew about it. Branson, never one to shy away from the bold moves, followed their lead and extended unlimited vacation to employees at Virgin headquarters. I wrote an article for Inc. magazine about this at the time, and it went viral. It wasn't because the idea was radical, though it was a radical idea, but because it challenged one of the oldest, most entrenched beliefs in the modern workplace: that time is a commodity that needs to be controlled, tracked, and rationed by managers. Back then, flexible work hours were still rare in 2014, and working from home was almost unheard of for the average employee. Unlimited vacation, flex hours, and remote work were largely confined to tech startups and a handful of forward-thinking organizations. Today, dozens of well-known companies, along with many smaller ones, now offer unlimited vacation. Still, most organizations cling to the industrial age model of managing employees like children, prescribing when they should arrive, where they should sit, and how long they can be away from their desk. And yet the data is clear. Giving employees, the stakeholders in your business, control over their time and autonomy over their work doesn't just make them happier. It makes the company more profitable, productive, and sustainable. If you want to make more money, free your employees up, treat them like adults. There's an industrial age mindset that's involved in this whole thing. It wasn't invented by the industrial age, but the industrial age just put together, it codified so many bad ideas that had been rummaging around for centuries. And one of them is that we have to trade time for money. For over a century, the business world has operated under the assumption that time is the currency of labor. The deal was simple. Employees trade 8 to 10 hours a day for a paycheck, and in return, management supervises, measures, and enforces compliance. The industrial age taught us that the only way to make money was by tightly controlling this exchange. Efficiency was measured in hours, not in outcomes. You give me 8 hours and I pay you for 8 hours. And what happens during those 8 hours? It's almost not relevant. Productivity was judged by seat time, not by results. Rules and policies, often arbitrary, were the mechanisms by which managers maintained control. If you were in the seat for 8 hours and the other guy left 30 minutes earlier, he'd get fired. In the 2 times I worked for somebody else, I could be done with my work by noon and have to sit there until 5, while other people didn't get done at 5. It was always about time. It was never about productivity. So let's talk about why unlimited vacation works. Many organizations resist unlimited vacation because it seems chaotic and a potential recipe for abuse. But this objection is rooted in that old industrial age mindset. The traditional system has been in place for over 170 years, and it has never optimized for outcomes. Vacation days are accrued, tracked, and enforced. But in many companies, employees don't even take the time off they earn. In a world where results, not hours, matter, a rigid vacation policy is not only unnecessary, it is counterproductive. Branson didn't invent the idea of unlimited vacation. He was late to the party in some ways. Yet his action in 2014 underscored a broader truth. Modern workers, particularly those under 40, do not relate to a time-based system. They respond to responsibility, autonomy, and trust. Offering unlimited vacation signals respect for employees as stakeholders in the company's mission, not as replaceable cogs in a machine. One company, Evernote, offers $1,000 and Full Contact offers $7,500 for people to actually take their vacations. The idea is not to control time, but to encourage balance, rejuvenation, and engagement. When employees are rested and trusted, they work harder, smarter, and with great commitment. Here's a dirty little secret. When you treat people like owners, they act like owners. Yes, there are exceptions. And do you really want to manage all of those adults to the exception? That's what most companies do. They keep the children who want to act like children and they treat everybody like children. I think there's a better way. You need to lead the people who want to be adults and help the other people find another place if they want to be children at work. I love Ricardo Semler's company, Semco. You may have heard me talk about it. It's in a few of my books. He was a leader in the 1980s. He was a participation age pioneer. No discussion of autonomy and an unlimited vacation would be complete without talking about Ricardo and his transformation of his dad's company in the 1980s, Semco. It's in Brazil. Semco, originally an industrial age factory producing pumps in 1951, was a conventional operation until Ricardo took it over in 1981. And he told his dad to be basically, I'm not going to do this unless you let me have free reign. And dad retired and Ricardo took over. Rather than applying the usual hierarchical control, Semco dismantled the rigid structure and replaced it with small work groups that operated without assembly lines. Each group manufactured products autonomously, making decisions collectively and managing its own workflow. They also decided when to come to work. Each work group decided when to come to work and when to leave and how many days a week to work. They had a minimum number of pumps they needed to produce. And Ricardo would say, if you produce that number by Wednesday, go home and enjoy your family and come back next Monday. They were on their own in terms of time. Semler instituted what he called a no policy culture. Employees set their own schedules, decided on compensation matters collectively, and determined their vacation schedules. I use this because this was a manufacturing company. You can't do this in manufacturing. Maybe you can do this with service, workers or knowledge workers especially, but you can't do it in a manufacturing environment. That's why I work with this example, because they've been doing it since the 1980s. Semco grew from a $4 million company that was losing money every year into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, expanding into multiple industries far beyond its original scope. They do banking, restaurants, accounting, all kinds of crazy stuff. Started with pumps. How did they get there? It's because they turned people loose. They decided everybody was an adult, and if you had a good idea, you could bring it to the company, and they might actually do something with it. Turnover, here's a stunning thing. In a manufacturing environment, turnover is usually around 32 to 35% a year. 1 out of 3 people leave every year. Every 3 years, you've got a whole new workforce. Turnover in Semco since the 1980s has been less than 1% to maybe sometimes up to 1.5% per year. I mean, that's 30 times less than the average manufacturing company. Think of the cost of retraining and the cost of bad attitudes and hirings and firings, all of that stuff that just goes out the window. The tax, we call it the retention tax, goes away. Productivity, innovation, and engagement soared, not in spite of lack of management oversight, but because employees were treated as responsible stakeholders rather than supervised children. There were no managers, and there are no managers at Semco. The key takeaway from Semco is that trust is not a weakness. It is a multiplier. Small groups given autonomy outperform centrally controlled hierarchies. When employees own their own work and their time, they care more, they innovate more, and they produce more. So let's talk about remote work. The pandemic proved some things we'd been talking about probably for a decade before that. If Semco provided early proof, the COVID-19 pandemic provided modern, large-scale validation of this principle. Entire organizations, including government, the Small Business Administration, and countless Fortune 500 companies transitioned to remote work almost overnight, and it was 100%. Everybody worked from home. And I remember watching some of the CEOs and how they were sure this was just going to crater them. And then 3 or 4 months later, they were all surprised that it was working. For over 2 years, these organizations functioned effectively without the constant physical presence of managers. Productivity held steady, deadlines were met, and operations continued without disruption. Yet despite this success, many corporations demanded employees return to offices as soon as public health restrictions eased, and that stampede back to the office has just continued. The rationale? It's not a good one. It's an emotional. It's not a rationale. There's nothing rational about it. Managers wanted to see people, to maintain physical control, and just to feel secure in their authority. The excuse about eroded culture or lost collaboration was largely anecdotal, not backed by measurable declines in productivity or engagement. In reality, remote work had demonstrated that employees could manage their own time and locations successfully. What did we do in response? We herded them back into the daycare center so we could manage them like children. The pandemic highlighted a truth that many traditionalists ignore to this day. If you are meeting or exceeding the goals and objectives for your work, we don't care where you are or when you are. The world of work is not defined by physical presence or hours logged. It is defined by results delivered, at least in my real world. And organizations that recognize this are seeing the benefits in engagement, retention, and profitability. So what's this argument for autonomy? Giving employees autonomy over their time is not philanthropy. It's not some kind of feel-good thing. It is sound economics. It is great business strategy. Studies show that organizations that offer flexible schedules, remote work, unlimited vacation hours, and things like that consistently report higher productivity, number one. And stakeholders focus on outcomes rather than on clocking hours. Greater innovation. Autonomy encourages creating problem solving and initiative. Lower turnover. Stakeholders stay longer when they feel trusted and valued. And higher profitability. Reduced absenteeism, increased engagement, and innovation drives the bottom line. I worked with one customer 4, 5, 6 years ago. Well, actually, it was before the pandemic, so it would have been 6 or 7 years ago. It was just a small company of 16 people. And they instituted this one thing. If you have everything done that you need to have done by Thursday afternoon, take Friday off. It's now been 6, 7, 8 years, and nobody has worked on Friday since then. And they have exponentially increased their profitability. They've grown exponentially. Everything's better magically. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, those sandbaggers, how dare they work like that? Yeah, that's not capitalism. The guy who owns the company, if I said to him, okay, I want you to increase your productivity and your revenue by 20% this year, and I might give you a 1% increase in salary at the end of the year, he's not motivated to do that. But what if we gave them a carrot? What if we gave them the capitalist carrot and say, hey, if you do X, we'll give you Y? The industrial age mindset presumes that supervision equals productivity. In the participation age, trust equals productivity. When employees feel like partners in the business rather than obligations to be managed, the results speak for themselves. We need to stop treating people like stuff. Stuff needs to be managed. Everything on my desk is stupid and lazy. And unless I manage it, it's not going to do what I want it to do. People in general are not stupid and lazy. And the very few who don't want to be that don't have to be in your company. The overwhelming majority of people, when you treat them like adults, will respond that way. So beyond economics, there is this human element. Treating employees as stakeholders and giving them control over their schedules recognizes that life does not pause at the office door. Time for family, hobbies, mental health, and personal growth, it's not wasted, it's fuel. Stakeholders who feel supported in balancing work and bringing their best selves to the company day in and day out will do better. If it's Tuesday morning and your kid is having a play in 3rd grade, and it's the only time that kid is ever going to be in that play, you should be at that play. You can work later that evening when the kid is in bed, or you can work more at another time. This is why unlimited vacation, flexible hours, and remote work are not fringe perks. They're essential practices for sustainable business success. They are the participation age equivalent of investing in machinery during the industrial age. The return is measurable: higher engagement, better results, and a more resilient organization. So we need to break these old industrial age habits. Despite the evidence, most organizations still cling to the industrial age habits of rigid schedules, mandatory office presence, and a meticulous tracking of time. Articles in mainstream media sometimes defend these policies, framing autonomy as a risk to productivity or culture. But the reality is simpler. Companies succeed when they trust stakeholders to manage their own work. Every argument for control over time is a legacy assumption going way back to factories. It was a habit of the industrial age, not a reflection of modern organizational science. Companies that persist in monitoring employees like children are not optimizing for results. They're managing anxiety, control, and perception. Their own anxiety, their own control, their own perception. Managers are simply uncomfortable with letting go, often citing culture and collaboration as reasons to enforce office attendance. Yet the success stories from Semco, Netflix, Virgin, and all the pandemic companies' remote work shows that there are no excuses. There is no evidence that we should keep doing this to people. The participation age model works, but it requires a mindset change, a new mindset. 5 things. Number 1, trust stakeholders. Do you believe people are stupid and lazy, or do you believe that they are smart and motivated? These are self-fulfilling prophecies, and I can tell you from my own experience, people raise themselves to our lowest expectations of them. Believe that if employees are meeting or exceeding goals, it doesn't matter where they are or when they work. Number 2, eliminate unnecessary policies. Replace rigid attendance, vacation tracking, and micromanagement with autonomy and accountability. I think it was actually Netflix who tracked how much money they saved for no longer tracking things like vacation and even business expenses. It was millions of dollars that they saved from not doing that. Number 3, measure results, not presence. Evaluate performance based on outcomes, not hours logged. I worked with one law firm that had about 60 people in it. And before we started, I asked them, give me your 2 best people. And the 2 best people they gave us were these 2 people who showed up at like 5:30 in the morning and didn't leave till 6:30 at night. Those are our 2 best people. And a year and a half later, we had gone through this whole thing about freeing people up and actually allowing them to be in control of their time and their destinies. Everybody in the company was working almost 8 hours less per week than they had been a year and a half later. And I asked them about these 2 people. And they literally said, we're probably going to have to let them go because they're still working from 5:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. And they're not getting anything as much done as the other people. But see, in the past, they had measured based on who showed up the longest. And now they're measuring based on productivity. It turns out these people are not the people they need in their business. Measure results, not presence. Number 4, encourage rest and balance. I would even call it integration. I don't like the word balance all that much. Provide unlimited vacation, flexible schedules, and remote work as tools for engagement and retention. And let's integrate the private life and the work life. If there's a play going on Tuesday at 10 in the morning, go to that play and then work later. Let's integrate. And then number 5, empower small teams or work groups. Like Semco, let small autonomous work groups manage processes, decision-making, and workflows. You'd be amazed at how smart people are, how 6 or 8 people in a work group could make decisions to manage processes and decision-making much better than the one manager that used to lord over them. Organizations that embrace these principles consistently outperform those clinging to industrial age control. Higher profits, higher retention, and higher engagement are the natural results. So what's the conclusion here? One of the conclusions we can draw today is time is the new money. You pay someone in time and they will get you results like you've never seen. We are at a crossroads. Companies can continue to treat employees like children whose time must be monitored, or they can recognize employees as stakeholders capable of being adults and managing their own productivity. The evidence is overwhelming. When you give people back control of their time, they will invest more in your business, innovate more, and generate higher profits. They will act like owners. The case studies are compelling. Semco transformed from a $4 million factory into a multi-billion-dollar diversified company. Netflix, Virgin, Evernote, Full Contact, many others have seen measurable gains in employee satisfaction and performance through autonomy. Remote work during the pandemic demonstrated as well that physical presence is not a prerequisite for productivity. And yet most organizations still cling to the outdated industrial age habits. We are in the participation age, and in the participation age, people want to build a company with you, not for you, and they want to be treated like adults. It doesn't have to be the way that we've done it since really the beginning of the factory system. If you are meeting or exceeding the goals and objectives for your work, we don't care where you are and we don't care when you are. Trust your stakeholders. Return their time to them and watch your business thrive in ways you could have never imagined. Time is the new money. Treat it that way, and your employees, your stakeholders, and your bottom line will thank you. I'll see you in the next podcast.
That wraps up another episode of the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button to ensure you are receiving the latest tools you need to grow your business and to get off the treadmill. If you want more information on the 3 to 5 Club, the Crankset Group, or to book Chuck as a business advisor, speaker, or workshop leader, you can contact us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.